Thank you very much for your help. Okay. Yep. Okay. Dr. Stewart's going to introduce you, so. Okay. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Dawn Magretta, and I'm the Executive Director of the Schoolcraft College Foundation. We are pleased that we're able to bring this to you as students and faculty and staff to learn a little bit about business, workforce, and what the future looks like for you as you move into your first career, or second career, or 17th career. So at this point, Todd Stowell asked me to make a few announcements. Most of you have probably heard this, but this afternoon at 1 o'clock here in this building, we have a guest speaker on Take the Initiative event, and to help you prepare for college success. He's a college success coach. Also, if you have a 3.5 or higher GPA, there's a Phi Theta Kappa Honor Society orientation tonight at 7 o'clock. And there's a blood drive. So if you don't know Todd Stoll, he's over there, and talk to him after the event. At this point, I am happy to bring Stuart Baker to the, oh, I'm sorry, you're right. Okay, so this is a little lesson for those students. Make sure you bring up the agenda with you when you're kicking off a program. I'm honored to introduce Dr. Conway Jeffress, the president of Schoolcraft College, and who's been so supportive of bringing Heather in today. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Dawn. It's good to see you all here. I am going to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that we collectively face before you hear from Heather McGowan. And it is a follow-on to the meeting that we had this morning, where all of these tables were filled with business types. And most of those people are looking to find employees. That means you, one of these days. And so some of the things that we talked about, I think, would be kind of interesting to you. As much as you might hear that Michigan is having a tough time with employment issues, it kind of depends on what type of employment and what skills you have as to whether or not there's a problem or not. The truth of the matter is, in Michigan, in southeast Michigan, you don't have to go very far, there are 55,000 open jobs, and these are jobs that pay very decent wages. In addition to that, you look at the kinds of jobs that require some kind of college education. There are 124,000 people in southeast Michigan who have some college but haven't finished a degree. And in the cases where people who have attempted college but haven't finished, when an employer looks at you, it's the same thing as you never went. So there are completers to be had, and there are lots of people who fit that category, in addition to lots of jobs available. And another couple of facts we found kind of interesting is that most of the people who are out looking for jobs are not necessarily the 18-year-old folks, but also individuals who are about 30 years old or older. That may be ancient for some of you, not for me, but anyway, for some of you that may be ancient. At any rate, most people are independent. They are not dependent on their families for that, or they have children, or they have jobs, or they're doing this part-time. In other words, many of the things that you might face and think that you are alone in those categories, that's the nature of most people who are attending college, most people who are looking for jobs, and most people who will get jobs. So I'm hoping that when you hear some of what you will hear this morning, that will be encouraging to you, because the issue for all of the stats that I recited is that these are jobs that exist right now, but what jobs will exist in the future, and how will you need to be prepared? For those of us who are in the teaching side of it, we are in the business of producing talent, and that's you, and the employers are in the business of seeking that talent for their jobs and their workplace and for their incomes. There has to be a marriage, a tighter marriage there between those of you who are being prepared and those of you who will get the jobs that are available. This is one of those great things where, in the end, they can't do without you. You really have a very strong position. All you have to do is be ready to take it. So we hope this morning, after you listen to our futurists, that you will be more encouraged about the possibilities. There are lots of them, and I think that you can fit some of those occupations. In fact, as I look around the room, you know, I see these faces, and I see lots of people who could do lots of things, only if you wanted to do it. So it's kind of like, what is the promo for that TV show? It's like The Price is Right. Come on down, okay? You're the next contestant on The Price is Right. So at this point in time, I'd like to have Stuart Baker come up and tell you about our speaker this morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Conway. I'd like to do a little audience assessment here. How many Phi Theta Kappa students do we have in the audience? A few hands. Any honors scholars? Okay, well, those are the folks that we, pardon me? How many accounting? Yeah, how many accounting? That's right, you bring a class, thank you. It is an honor as a Schoolcraft Foundation board member to have the opportunity to introduce our keynote speaker today. Heather McGowan is an internationally known speaker, writer, and thought strategist. Ms. McGowan prepares leaders to react to rapid and disruptive changes in education, work, and society. As a future of work strategist, Heather has worked with diverse teams to address these challenges. Recognizing that business innovation begins with education, specifically learning faster than your competition, she has worked with university presidents and corporate human resources managers to prepare both graduates and workers for jobs that do not yet exist. She is often quoted in the media, notably by New York Times columnist and author Thomas Friedman. How many of you know who Thomas Friedman is? Good, awesome. For her thought leadership in the future of work. Now is a crucial time to look at what is needed to ensure Michigan has a relevant talent pipeline now and in the future. Her think tank is called Work to Learn because Ms. McGowan believes that in the third industrial revolution, we learned in order to work. And now, in the fourth industrial revolution, we will work in order to learn continuously. Please help me welcome Heather McGowan.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that introduction. Thank you guys for being here. Doesn't feel like that long ago I was in your seat, but obviously, you can look at me, it was. I found my way into this. Nobody decides when they're little they're going to be a future work strategist when they grow up. I was working in higher ed. I also had corporate clients, so I was working in both, which is fairly unusual. They call it the demand side and the supply side. And I noticed that they were speaking completely different languages. The world was changing really quickly, and the only people out there talking about it were people who were saying the robots are coming to take all your jobs. And I don't buy it. I'm incredibly optimistic about humans. I do think we need to think differently than the way we're thinking right now about not only work but also learning. So that's why I try to work in both domains and kind of bring them closer together. So I've organized this for you. It's probably be about 35, maybe 40 minutes. Lots of pictures, relatively fast. Afterwards, we'll have a little bit of a Q&A. And that's my contact information. Reach out to me. Tell me what you thought. Tell me what you liked, you didn't like, what you didn't understand. Happy to continue the conversation. My LinkedIn network is open, so just send me an invite. Tell me where we met. Tell me what you want to talk about. So this is how I've organized it today. I'm going to start with my future work thesis, how I see it. I'm then going to explain sort of the macro context of change that's taking place, which is causing people to say the robots are coming, but I see it a little differently. And then what that change means to humans, because we're workers and all that, but we're humans first. Then how those changes are impacting work. Then education, because I have a question about what we're really trying to do here. And then my work to learn thesis and what that kind of looks like. And then I'll summarize with some frameworks that sort of summarize, but also some tips that I think might be helpful. So I did a talk this morning for what was this filled room, which was much shorter and much faster. In this one, I'm going to unpack it a little bit more for you guys. So first, my future work thesis. I believe three things. I believe the future work is learning and adapting. I believe that this is not just about lunging at technology skills. It's not about making everybody a STEM major. It's about learning how to learn. It's about learning how to adapt. Digital and data literacies are important. We're going to live in a world where that's as important as understanding how to read and understanding quantitative skills. So we don't have to have some level of data and digital literacies, but it's really more about learning how to learn. And then I think we're completely upside down in how we think about learning, because I think what we've got to start with is identity. I'll explain that. Mindset, I'll explain that. And what I call enablers, which are the uniquely human skills. Some people call them soft skills, but soft skills was a word that came up when we thought hard skills were what men did, math and science. And soft skills, communication, collaboration, and creativity, what women did. And I think that gendering that doesn't help anybody, so I don't use the word soft skills. So I think the world used to look like this, and for many of our institutions, it's still built like this. Education existed in one discrete band all by itself. Then there was career. Then there was retirement. Whether you went to education, whether you went to university or not, education was the first third of your life. Then you got on the career escalator, you collected a pension, and you died a year later. And that was by design. And education did its job if it got you on the first rung of the ladder. And that's did they codify, did they figure out what you needed to know that already exists? Did they transfer those knowledge and skills into you to get you the first step on the ladder? Now I think it looks more like this. Life expectancy is not 90 yet, but it will be soon as a norm. Education becomes learning, because learning implies it's continuous. Education implies being educated as an end state. Learning has no end state. Work becomes leverage of that learning to signal that work and learning are the same. They're a combined act. And realizing that we're living so much longer, it's not about retirement, it's about how are we going to manage and deal with longevity. So it looks more like this. The career escalator is gone. It's a web, or some people say it's a series of waves. Some people use the analogy of rock climbing. Some people use the analogy of surfing. And we remain engaged later in life. Success measures here are not about codifying and transferring any set skill in you so you can become an X. It's about developing a resilient and adaptive identity, an agile learning mindset, and uniquely human skills. And on top of that, you're going to add and delete a lot of skills to do. You guys may have a major right now, and you may think that's what you're doing for the rest of your life. You're not. It may be the first thing you do. You may never do it. So in the past, we learned once in order to work. And the reason I call my little think tank Work to Learn is because we've got to figure out how to work in order to learn continuously. And in this past, our identity was bestowed upon us. First thing we ask each other at a cocktail party, what do you do? I'm an accountant. Because somebody bestowed that accounting degree upon you, or bestowed that job upon you that gave you your identity. Now the world's changing so quickly, you're going to lose that identity. We have to figure out another way to build identity, which I think is self-actualized, is kind of a flowery word, but some way of internally validating, deciding who we are for ourselves in a way that it can't be taken away. So the next piece I'm going to walk you through is understanding how these changes are taking place in the world that is impacting work, learning, and how we live. I've had the good fortune of crossing paths with Thomas Friedman from the New York Times He's become a friend and a mentor. I think he does the best job of explaining what's happening out there. He says we're in the middle of 3 simultaneous climate changes. The first is the climate of technology. Technology is growing really quickly. One way to explain it is Moore's Law. How many of you guys have heard of Moore's Law? Okay, some of you. Moore's Law, Moore was CEO at Intel, and he said, he predicted 50 years ago, 2 years ago now, that computer chips would double in capacity and what they could do, and drop in half in price every year. Now it's every 18 to 24 months, or it's somewhere in that window, but he's been right. And one way to think about it, on the 50th anniversary of Moore's Law, they decided they would try to figure out a way to explain it to people. So they took a Volkswagen Beetle from 1971, and they said if we took that Volkswagen Beetle from 1971, we put it on the same trajectory as Moore's Law, it would go 300,000 miles an hour, it would get 2 million miles a gallon, and it would cost 4 cents. That's how much technology changes. I was born in 71, so that's my lifetime of change. The second climate change we're in is the climate of the climate. The UN says we've got 12 years to change our behavior to avoid catastrophe. NASA said yesterday or the day before that last year was the 4th hottest year on the planet in history that they've recorded, and all 4 of those years were in the last 18. So something's going on with the climate. We're seeing more superstorms, floods, wildfires, droughts, and that's causing massive human migration. So it's impacting more than just the environment, it's impacting aspects of our economy and how we live. And the third climate change is the climate of the market, which is really globalization, but it's not stuff on shipping containers that's made somewhere else, it's digital flows. And it's not just the flows of digital, it's what digital enables. So for example, when